ask you a question. So you have a Muslim husband, right?
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question via you for him.
No problem.
If Islam is so fantastic, why do Muslims always flee to Christian countries?
I tell you why, because Christian countries, or Western countries to be more precise, tend to send troops to their countries, destroy their homes, and then push them out of their neighborhoods. That's why, because
But why come to Christian countries? Why not go to Saudi or another Muslim?
Nothing is more satisfying than watching a smug reporter try to trap Katie Hopkins on immigration and Islam, only to get absolutely dismantled with cold, hard logic. The reporter would have stood a better chance with another person. But the moment she picked Katie, a no-nonsense media juggernaut herself, she sliced herself in the throat. Listen this.
Prioritize social cohesion over freedom of speech, and that has been like that over many years, I would even argue centuries, and I think it only intensified under Putin. Do you still think he rocks?
Yeah, I think Putin rocks in many ways.
But he stands contrary to most of your ideas. I mean, he would be absolutely appalled by many of the things you say.
That's fine as well. I think you started out by saying, you know, do we live in a society where we can disagree but still sit in the same room? I don't mind if Putin thinks many of my ideas are morally abhorrent. That's absolutely his right to have his views. I hold my views very clearly and very dearly. For me, I come from a country where there is an Islamic takeover going on. I come from a country where my daughters, our daughters, are targeted by Islamic jihadists. And that's not, I'm not afraid to say any of the things I say.
Why would
it's very
Putin rock
important.
then? I mean, I understand your
So why
baggage,
does Putin rock to me? Because for too long the West has painted him as a monster, and I don't think it's acceptable any longer. Should he be back in the G8? Absolutely. Does he need to have sanctions against him? No, I don't. I don't have a problem with Putin in the way that other people seem to, or maybe you have.
Well, I don't know if you follow Putin's statements, but just last week he spoke again about the need to relax immigration rules in Russia, and he specifically pointed out that, you know, people of all religious and ethnic backgrounds should be welcomed, especially if they have some connection to Russia or the so-called Russian world. So he seems to be far more bullish on immigration, particularly Muslim immigration, than Theresa May's government.
I don't know. I don't know if you could be. I don't know if you could bend down on. You know, if you could sort of cow in submission to a religion more than we have. We have de facto Sharia law in the UK right now. We prevented a journalist from coming into our country on the basis of future hate speech, as yet unsaid. That is a bizarre situation.
The reporter opens by trying to paint London as a success story of multiculturalism. Katie shuts that down immediately. She describes what she actually sees: monocultures living in isolated ghettos, not blending or rubbing shoulders. This hits hard because it's true. Real multiculturalism should mean integration and shared values. What we're getting instead are parallel societies that don't want to become British. I'm tired of the fairy tale that mass migration from incompatible cultures always leads to strength. In too many places, it leads to division and tension. Keep watching, because Katie is about to drop the hammer on London's Muslim mayor and the chaos happening under his watch.
We have it much
well,
worse.
This country also has its very peculiar understanding of the freedom of speech, but, you know, bringing you back to the Muslim immigration or any immigration for that matter, I think the difference is how our societies are handling it, and in this country it would not be considered advisable to put people in high density neighborhoods. They would be
agreed.
Not only required to integrate, but the state would actually facilitate that integration.
And on that, you and I completely agree. You know, I've seen multiple examples in the no-go zones that I visited across Europe where migrants are all packed away into the suburbs. It never works. It creates a situation where there's them and us. If you go to Sweden, if you go to Belgium, if you go to parts of London, there's parts of London, Sweden, Belgium, you can't walk anymore if you're a Western woman and you have your hair uncovered. You'll be spat at and called white trash. That's never going to work. And if you have a system here where you are able to integrate, of course that's going to work much better. But we don't have multiculturalism. It's what I was explaining to you. We have a system of monocultures living in ghettos. That's a very different thing.
Now, much of Russia's immigration comes from the so-called stans: Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and you're famous or infamous for referring to London as Londonistan, which you have to agree carries some pejorative connotation.
Which is pejorative, absolutely.
What's
That's why
wrong
I use
with
it.
stans?
The reason I call London Londonistan is because to me it's completely fallen to the control of the Muslim mayor there, Sadiq Khan. He is spectacularly useless at his job. Under Sadiq Khan, there are some statistics that I'm sure neither you nor I could argue about, in the sense that our murder rate is now higher than New York, in the sense that our stab rate has just gone up by 25%, in the number of acid attacks that are happening, 60 moped attacks a day with hammers and machetes. That's life in Londonistan under the Muslim mayor.
Katie calls London Londonistan for a reason and stands by it proudly. The statistics don't lie. This isn't random bad luck. It's the direct result of uncontrolled immigration and failed integration. Respect to Katie for refusing to soften her language. Polite euphemisms have protected these problems for too long. When certain communities dominate entire neighbourhoods and bring disproportionate crime, pretending it's all fine is gaslighting the British people.
A lack of control, a lack of law and order, and a political Islam where religion and politics are integrated and people vote according to their faith, and that is not democracy.
But, from what you describe, you seem to have the beef with the uncontrolled immigration and integration policies, and yet the way you express it is pejorative in a much broader sense, because stands mean countries, not cities. Why would
Because London is a country of its own, and that's precisely why I use the word. It is pejorative, yes.
By making that statement, you are mocking other countries rather than the UK authorities, who are
I'm not
arguably
mocking
responsible.
the UK authorities. I'm mocking the Muslim mayor of London and the country that he's built there, where 95% of some areas, so if I think about Tower Hamlets, Newham, 90% Muslim population, that does not reflect multiculturalism. That is not a multicultural country or a city. And when he speaks only for London, and yet he appears to speak for the UK. And for someone like myself, who comes from a place called the rest of the UK, it's intensely...
The reporter tries to shame Katie for using strong words and mocking other countries. Katie fires back. She's mocking the transformation of her own capital city, not foreign nations. This selective outrage is exhausting. You could criticise British authorities all day, but call out the cultural and religious patterns behind the failure, and suddenly you're the problem. London has areas that are 80% to 90% Muslim. That is not multiculturalism. That is conquest by demographics. Native Brits are being replaced in their own homeland, and pointing it out is treated as hate.
But, Katie, I think you do understand that when you refer to Londonistan, people may draw conclusions about yourself without hearing your argument first, because I think that this point that you've been making about imported monocultures that exist in isolation, this is a very valid and under-discussed point in my view. It's a real sociological issue that has to be studied, and yet that issue seems to be brushed under the table because people take offense at you. Don't you think that the style of your presentation undermines the very valid argument that you're making?
Not for my money, because, you know, there is apart from the kind of social study of monocultures that I think is so imperative, and that's why I've done the work I've done in Sweden, in Sicily, in all of the no-go zones that I visit. I do actually want Sadiq Khan to be out. I want him out of office. I want to champion getting that man out of office.
And will you achieve that by referring to London as Londonistan?
I think we spend far too much time tiptoeing around issues these days. I think it's one of the reasons I think your line of questioning is good, because you come straight to the point. And it's very much the style that I use with my commentary, especially if you use the format like Twitter. You haven't got 45 minutes to check.
Look at her embarrassed face when Katie calls out her immature interviewing skills. It's an absolute mockery.
You've got a few words to make your
Katie,
point.
with all due respect, I would never compare anyone to cockroaches. I think you can find a more expressive metaphor. I mean, I know this whole controversy about your
I think
column.
it was very fair. I think you're undermining the column, which still stands today. So 2014, no, if you bring it up, I'm going to talk about it. 2014, I wrote a column that compared migrants across the Med to we need to give it reference. Cockroaches. I said they're like cockroaches because they have an enduring nature. They seem to be able to survive no matter what. And we were taught in schools the only creature that can survive a nuclear holocaust is cockroaches. That still applies today.
That still applies today,
Boats
but everybody is
arriving
arguing about
right
your
now.
choice of words rather than the issue you were trying to raise.
Have we stopped the boats? No. Did 932
because
migrants just
everybody
arrive
is
on a boat?
arguing whether
Yes.
using cockroach was a nice way
Tell me, while you're arguing about cockroaches, tell me,
there are many resilient species.
Tell me.
Come on. Well, you could have compared them to whales
That's
or
not my question.
seagulls and so
Whales. That would be a bizarre way of writing copy and very poor English. But let me ask you a question. The Aquarius, with, I think it's 632, it could be 932, I apologise for not knowing. Let's say 632 migrants on board. It has nowhere to dock. Italy just said, no, we won't have you. Tell me, what would you do about that?
If you broke it, you own it. It was in part Western and primarily UK policy that created the mess in Libya. And if you created that mess in those neighborhoods, you should expect certain repercussions for yourself.
So what? So what port should take them? Which port?
The reporter then tries a gotcha question about migrant boats, but Katie's response cuts straight through the excuses.
Well, Malta said no.
You guys have to chip in as well.
But that's no solution. So
why is it not a solution to send your troops to a foreign country or to send your special forces there to unravel the life there and then refuse to accept them?
We shouldn't be running ferry boats across the Med. That's in no way
You're
reasonable.
a common sense lady, and what you're trying to tell me is that causes don't have consequences. You're simply trying to wish them away, and I don't think that's a common sense solution. Seriously.
I think you're overlooking this idea that people say they're running from something, they're fleeing something. In my opinion, and it seems surprising to me, I would think as a mum it seems surprising to you, why is it these young men of fighting age are running away? But if it's that terrifying there, why do they leave their women and children? I've been on the coast of southern Italy trying to get those NGO boats.
I've been to Libya, and I can tell you that...
Why do they leave their women and children behind? If it's so terrifying, tell me that.
Look,
answer my question.
Well, because first of all, many of them are not married. Most of the people who migrate into Europe are...
So just the young men come?
Yes.
Because it's so scary in Libya, they leave the women behind. Really?
Yes.
All they manage to bring is their mobile phone. Really?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yes, because...
we completely disagree.
Well, we certainly disagree on that, but don't you think that, I mean, I understand your point on immigration, but don't you think that by arguing this line of argument, you're also absolving your own government of its responsibilities, because it did contribute to the mess, and you recognize that in your argument on Syria, for example. You do not support the UK government policies on Syria.
The solution is not to bring people on ferry boats run by charities over the Med. The solution is in-country solution. Just as in Syria and other migrant camps, we've suggested facilitating in-country solutions, because of course
you don't want to send them money for that. The UK is very stingy about allocating money for
we did actually
rebuilding.
give additional monies after the incident.
Well, it's not enough to rebuild the country.
The answer is certainly not to bring those people to...
Even though they'd never admit it, Muslims will rather not go to a fellow Muslim country. You know why? Christian nations are freer, richer and more tolerant, exactly the qualities many migrants then work to erode once they arrive. This is the core contradiction that drives so much frustration. People flee failed Islamic societies, only to demand the same rules that caused the failure in the first place. Britain didn't sign up for cultural replacement.
Personality. Katie, just before the break we were talking about multiculturalism, and I want to repeat the point that you made earlier, that you believe that the UK hasn't been able to achieve it. What you have is, ghettos of individual cultures. Absolutely. Rather than, true diversity, the mixing of various cultures. And yet you also wrote in your book, and you made that point over and over again in many of your interviews, that you wouldn't let your kids play with anyone who isn't called Margaret, Nigel, Donald, let alone Mohammed. Isn't that the very attitude that fosters cultural ghettos in the first place?
Well, this was less of a cultural thing in the sense of different ethnic backgrounds. This was my experience from going to a state school in the UK. And you could tell, I had this kind of idea as a mum doing the school run, you could tell what a kid would be like by its name. And I still stand by that. So there's certain names that I hear, and it'll be Tyler, it'll be Destiny, all of these kind of names.
But
and
you also mentioned
sort of
the name Mohammed.
Well, Mohammed, if you think about it in the UK, and it's shocking to me, the number one name in the UK is Mohammed. The number two name in the UK is Mohammed. And I find that from a demographic perspective, it's very frightening that actually by 2050 there'll be more Muslim births in the UK than there will be British births. And I find that actually quite distressing.
You know, I have a kid who is born to a Muslim father.
Sure.
He's 4 years old.
Is he called Mohammed?
Things get even spicier when Katie asks her a very personal question about her own Muslim husband, and her reply cuts deep.
His name is different, but
It's not Mohammed.
It is a Muslim name.
But is it Mohammed?
It is not Mohammed, but it is a Muslim name.
Well
and
done.
I wonder, well, I mean, I would have called him Mohammed if...
But then everyone's called Mohammed, so how do you know who's your Mohammed?
I think in Russia I would have lesser problem finding a Mohammed at a playground.
Let me ask you a question if you have a Muslim husband.
But first, let me ask you a question. Would you ban your kid from playing with my kid? Because he has a Muslim-sounding name.
No, as long as he had... I mean, it wasn't really done on names other than I could tell what a kid would be like with their names, but it was about the fact that they would turn up to school without their homework, they'd turn up without the right uniform, they don't have the manners that I prefer for my children, and I am
and
quite...
do you think Muslim families are not as diligent
it was never about Muslim families. It was about the types of families that I met in the school playground and the types of mums that I wasn't particularly keen on. Whatever we say, we all know the mums that we like and the mums that we don't like. I was just really honest about it.
But regardless of whether you were referring to like a British kid or a Muslim kid, isn't that a fundamentally anti-Christian thing to say? Because, you know, you talk a lot about
I've done many anti-Christian things in my life. I am not a good ambassador for the Christian religion,
and yet you talk a lot about Christian values as underpinning the...
I'm just criticising myself
society.
Because, like, if you see any of the stuff that I've done, I mean, I think many Christians would want to distance themselves from me entirely. But what I noticed about people with their strong beliefs, particularly...
Parents naturally want good influences for their children. She admits she's not a perfect Christian example, but she respects strong faith when she sees it in places like Russia. The reporter keeps pressing, but Katie stays grounded in her experiences as a mother. This part shows the human side of these debates, people making choices to protect their own kids in a changing country. Right after that, Katie drops her sharpest question of the whole interview.
You know, it's a joy to be surrounded by so many Christian churches, by the Orthodox, people that believe so strongly. 90% of people here believe in the Christian faith. That's key. Second thing, I haven't finished. The second thing I really think about the Christian faith, having watched people in South Africa who are being persecuted, is there's a real belief in God and the land, and people need something to believe in, and I really respect that, even though I'm a bad ambassador for Christianity.
Katie, let me... correct you a little bit because
you're going to try and correct stats.
This is one of the most atheist cities in Russia.
We can argue about stats all you want. Well, it's a very Christian-feeling city.
Well,
let me ask you the question
feeling
I
is in
wanted
the
to
eye
ask you.
of the beholder, but if you actually pull people
let me
here,
ask you a question. So you have a Muslim husband, right?
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question via you for him.
No problem.
If Islam is so fantastic, why do Muslims always flee to Christian countries?
I tell you why, because Christian countries, or Western countries to be more precise, tend to send troops to their countries, destroy their homes, and then push them out of their neighborhoods. That's why. Because
but why come to Christian countries? Why not go to Saudi or another Muslim country?
Well, because Saudi Arabia actively prevents their Muslim neighbors from going there, and the UK government or the US.
But why does Saudi prevent migrants going there?
Look, I'm not an ambassador for the Saudi government.
No, but I'm asking
because
why come to Christian lands?
It is a repressive government.
Isn't it because Christian lands are free and tolerant and open? And isn't that the very thing that Muslims try and change when they arrive in our country? That's my question and my challenge in the UK.
When you say that
I don't have an answer from you.
Katie's question exposes the core contradiction. Christian countries are freer, richer, and more tolerant, the very things many migrants then try to change once they arrive. Katie's challenge is fair and uncomfortable. People leave failed systems only to recreate the same problems in the West. This pattern creates the tension we see across Europe.
When you actually...
Open, tolerant, welcoming, enabling people to practice religion, but then they try and take over.
And yet you actively and publicly advocate for the rejection, for the shunning of children, for the ostracizing of children based on their names?
Yes.
And you call that tolerant and open?
No, I'm not saying, I said a million times, I'm not a great ambassador for being Christian, but I'm asking you, why do Muslims always seem to come to Christian countries and then want to take over?
Well, I thought I actually tried to answer, because many Western countries wage wars on Muslim countries.
Why go there then? Why not go to Saudi? Why not go to another country where
when you
the
have
Muslim
a kid,
faith is practiced.
Katie,
Tell me.
when you have a kid on your hands, you try to find any refuge. Literally, you would go across the Mediterranean even if you don't know how to swim. You would do anything possible for your 2-year-old
But we
or
don't
3-year-old.
see any women and children on the boats
We
across
do
the Med.
we do see, but
Two.
even though I would agree that primarily it is
620 something on the Aquarius, 11 children. We don't see many women and children, I promise you.
Well,
they're left behind.
I've reported extensively from the ground, both in Libya and in Syria. So believe me, I think you could afford me some credibility. And there are
I'm not
women
questioning your
and
credibility.
children in desperate conditions, but it is more difficult for them to move.
Notice how the reporter struggles to answer why migrants don't go to Muslim countries and brings up children and desperation. The reality on the boats too is stacked, mostly young men, very few women and children. She's seen the numbers. It shows that migration isn't always pure humanitarian escape. This intense moment shows why Katie connects with so many people. She asks simple questions others avoid and refuses to feel guilty for wanting her country to stay safe and recognizable. The frustration is real when open, tolerant societies keep importing values that reject openness and tolerance. Honest talk like this is badly needed. If you like how Katie completely handled the reporter, hit subscribe and kindly share your thoughts in the comments below.